first of all, welcome everybody to the show and just make everybody aware that we've had a few changes to the podcast. I've brought Sergeant Nick Keys on board as a co-host for this season. So welcome, Nick.
Thanks for having me back, your sidekick on the podcast.
Yeah, our conversation that we had during your recorded episode of the podcast was very successful. So we're going to collaborate and work together all the time on the podcast. So welcome. Thanks for joining me and agreeing to do this with me.
No problem. Excited to do it. So it sounds like we are doing a International Women's Day episode today. So happy International Women's Day to everyone that's listening. And it looks like Canada's theme this year for 2024 is invest in women and accelerate progress. Yeah, and I think that is going to lend itself nicely to our next guest that we're bringing on.
So today's guest, without further ado, started their career with the OPP 29 years ago. She's currently the Deputy Commissioner responsible for Culture and Strategy Services. Please welcome to the show Deputy Commissioner Kari Dart. Deputy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for that kind introduction and having me.
Happy International Women's Day.
Thank you very much. The theme for this year in itself is incredibly inspiring. And to have our colleagues recognize the day and create opportunities for discussion like this is super important. So I'm so pleased to be with you today.
Not only are we celebrating International Women's Day, but it's a big time of year for the OPP, and it's a big marker for us as the 50th anniversary of women in policing in our organization, with the first 15 joining us in 1974.
Yeah, and Nick, just to clarify, it's 50 years of women in uniform in the OPP.
Yes.
We did have our first female join the organization in a civilian capacity just prior to women joining the organization in a uniform capacity.
Right. I was reading about that. They had guards and they had different roles, and then they decided, well, okay, they're basically doing a lot of the roles of an officer, so why not open it up? And so I've been doing some research this morning. It's been actually pretty interesting reading up on it on our museum page on opp.ca.
Yeah.
What would it have looked like for a uniform female officer 50 years ago?
Wow, great question. Well, if you were to look at their physical appearance, joining the organization, their uniforms are very different than their male colleagues at that time. I couldn't imagine it today, but shockingly, for a number of years, they wore skirts and they carried essentially like a purse for their sidearm. I think members of the community were pretty curious, right, when they saw their first female OPP uniform member show up at calls for service, as were a number of the members of the OPP who were, primarily men. It was a big transition for the community as well as the organization.
It was a holster in the purse, right? Built into the purse.
You got it.
And skirts and high heels, I read as well.
Yes.
Wow.
Right. Yeah.
And a pillbox, kind of a cap of some kind.
Yes. Yeah. So they were made to look distinctly different. I will say that in short order, it became pretty clear that none of it was practical, interfered with their ability to do their job. And with those women who leaned into a very unfamiliar space, which that in itself needs to be celebrated, were very influential in actually creating the change that they needed to do their job and be seen as equals with their male colleagues. So bravo to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sitting here listening to you talk about this, and I'm thinking like the courage that it probably took them to really step outside of what their comfort probably was at the time and what society's comfort with policing and the expectation of policing at the time, to step into a male dominated world and culture, probably the doors that were constantly shut in their faces as they were trying to do that, like the resilience and the tenacity and the dedication to break through those doors and create opportunities for probably people like yourself.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. And I think it's really important that we not forget what they did, not only for other women, but a lot of the changes that they advanced actually ended up benefiting our male colleagues as well, with some of their asks for, and again, we spoke earlier about just uniform changes, but they really led the way for the whole organization to bring in change that would benefit the whole organization. So they're a group of women that we should never forget. And as they opened the door for us and started paving the way for us, creating opportunities for many other women to come into the organization and do really great things. Our public deserves to see themselves in their police. We need to represent the community, and we need an organization that has a whole host of diversity, whether it is perceptions, experiences, skill sets. With diversity comes a much healthier and stronger team. And that is why our recruitment efforts, which I love seeing, Nick, your poster there, careers within a career, your efforts in recruitment are so important, and how we target different audiences within the community and track them to a tremendous career within the OPP.
I was thinking about the recruiting aspect. Like, I want to talk to the recruiters from 1974 and see how they convince those first women to join. I'm sure it was mostly on the other side that there was a passion for it, but that must have been incredible. And obviously, we were reflecting on this just before you joined us, Deputy. But we're two men talking on International Women's Day. I think it's good because maybe a little bit of our lack of experience in that that lens will help us draw out some information from you. And being fathers of daughters, we have a definite vested interest. How many, Dan? 4 daughters. I have 2 at home, and Dan's got 4. So anything that's going to it's going to make the world a better place for our girls when they start joining the workforce is amazing. And I see that a lot when I'm looking at your command, the umbrella of your command, and the responsibilities that fall under that. Me personally, when I was joining recruitment, I was like, well, how do I sell this career at a time where that we're being scrutinized by the public for our culture? And a lot of different reasons, right? And I looked at your area of command, and it seems like an incredible place to make change, the change that I think we really need to make in our organization, and to change that culture and bring it forward. So I thought that was really neat. And a lot of these terms, or at least the branding of these areas of our organization, seem new to me, but really encouraging to see.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know if you could tell us a little bit about those different areas, because I see some huge things that they address and that they kind of hold us accountable to. It's recommendations and things like that.
Yeah. So, Nick, thanks for that and the opportunity to talk about a new command for the OPP. And maybe we should start there. With Commissioner Creek, he was very successful in obtaining the support from our provincial government for the establishment and the creation of a brand new command for the OPP. So essentially, this is part of our legacy now as Team OPP. We are making history with the dedication and the investment of having a 5th deputy commissioner come into the organization who has a portfolio that I often describe as being one that surrounds the rest of the organization in a warm embrace, right? Because everything that you look at, what we're responsible for right now, really at its core, what we're talking about is behavior. We're talking about transformation, and we're talking about growth. And whether or not we look at that through the lens of the individual people that make up this wonderful organization, we look at it through the lens of program and unit and team's mandate, as well as looking at it through the lens of the organization and where we need to be as an organization, not just tomorrow, but, I'm looking at right now, I'm looking at the OPP and what are we going to look like in 5 years? What do we need to look like in 5 years, in 10 years? Nick, one of the words that you just used, actually, you used the change word. As I develop and grow in my new position, I recognize that word change can be pretty intimidating. I'm changing my perspective, and I have removed that word from my vocabulary. And the reason is because when we talk about mindset and the importance of mindset, really at the heart of everything within this new command, it's about growth.
Right.
This organization, we talked about, 1974 when first women arrived in the OPP. We have grown since 1974. We have advanced, and growth is something that we should expect of each other. Growth is something that we should expect of ourselves, both personally as well as professionally. And we shouldn't be intimidated by that. That is what makes us better. And growth is something that really positions us in a place where we can better serve the public who we're responsible to and who we're responsible for. So at the center of this new command is growth and behavior. And how is it that we can support the entire organization on its journey in periods of growth, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess my perspective has always been like change is one of those things that's really scary for people, right? And when you start using that word change, it can create barriers and walls for people, right? So and for people, they might say, okay, well, you're just changing the word, but the word changes the perspective. And right. So and then you get that transition, which is like important, right?
Yeah. And, honestly, when you look at our organization and the work that we do and the work that we have done historically over the years of our existence, I wouldn't suggest that we need to change us. What we need to really focus on is embracing opportunities to grow. You don't change culture, for example, you grow culture. And when you look at the value statements of the OPP and what they mean to us as an organization and what they mean to our community, our focus of growth needs to be centered on those values. And we need to be constantly finding ways to strive to be better. Yeah, so I'll be very honest, it's been a very unique opportunity for me coming into this new role. Historically, over my journey in 29 years with the OPP, I have served in a number of capacities, primarily operationally in different roles. This is the first time that I've been ever given an opportunity to really, really think about the culture of an organization. And it is incredibly interesting. It's super important, and it's at the heart of absolutely everything that our members do every single day across the province.
And I don't know about you, Dan, but I think that growth is crucial for us in recruiting, because the public's perception is different than it used to be in policing, and I think that the more that those values are that we show those core values of the organization, I think the easier it's going to be to attract people. Their old ideas of what policing looked like or what a police officer looked like will start to kind of fall away and as we grow, I think.
Yeah, I agree. As you're speaking, Deputy, I wonder what barriers, from a perspective of a woman in policing, what kind of barriers do you see that are limiting engagement from females in a career in policing?
That is a really great question. And I feel there are a lot of complexities. And this is a question that I feel truthfully our organization has continued to struggle with. I'm not sure if are you aware of the gender ratio in uniform right now in the OPP?
Roughly, I would say, yes, that 20 to 24% representation.
Yeah, so we, since, and again, generally speaking, since 1974, when the first women arrived in the OPP, we have been hovering around the 20% ratio right now for women in uniform. We had, I think, historically, we've had two spikes. One is in 94, 95, 96 era, which is really my vintage, where we actually had legislated policy imposed by the government at the time, where it was expected that the OPP would have a certain percentage of women in those classes. It was actually a legislated responsibility, and we had a spike, and then that ended, and the organization dropped again back to that 20%. We then in 2004 had a spike, and of interest, it was when the OPP really, I think it was the first time we created OPP Bound. So from a recruiting perspective, we really focused on targeting women in our communities and creating opportunities for them to get to know the OPP. And we saw a spike actually of women expressing interest in joining the OPP. And then Bound ended, and currently we're sitting right now I'm quite concerned to see what our numbers are right now. The commissioner and I speak about this with the rest of Commissioner's Command team. It is my opinion that we need to have some concerted efforts to get out and actually research why policing in general, not just the OPP, are not seeing the applicants from women in our communities to this profession. And there may be a number of different reasons for that. And that's what we have to get to the bottom of. Whether those barriers are perceived or real is what we have to identify.
I think there's probably both.
Yep.
I've had conversations with female applicants who are like, "Oh, I finally feel like I'm ready." And in my mind, I'm looking at their application and their information and their history, and I'm like, "You've been ready for a while, right?" So
Yeah.
I feel like there may be some perceived barriers there where the confidence isn't necessarily there, and belief that they can do this job or be successful in the application process.
I think you're right. I think that that's for sure a reality, and that is one of our differences, right, between men and women. When I reflect on myself joining the OPP, my interest was as a result of my father. And my father actually having a conversation with me that said, Kari, I think you would be a great police officer. I think our communities deserve somebody like you. And it was with the support of my father and my mother who really encouraged me to have a look at the OPP and what it actually means to be a police officer.
Can I just say that's like the nicest thing, the way he put that. The community deserves someone like you. Like, true, but that's a great thing for a dad to say. Good job, Dad.
Yeah, you got it. Well, and when you both share being fathers, I think your children deserve to have parents that are in their corner and helping and supporting them right? And giving them guidance and advice. But I don't know if it wasn't for them, if I would have really, really pursued a career. For me, that gentle nudge to go and actually explore the profession was important. And then once I started to explore, I got really excited about it. And here I am.
A lot of the time I find just planting that seed of like, I could do this. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause
Yeah.
you have this perception, and I even as just like a white guy, I
Mhm.
didn't think it was for me, and so I can't imagine for others that don't see themselves as represented in the career. It must seem like a lot more of like a pipe dream to do.
Mhm.
But soon as
Mhm.
someone that's in the role, I think, looks at you and says, "Hey, I think you'd be good at this
Yeah.
job," I find that flipped a switch in me, and just to hear someone suggest it, because
Yeah, and Nick, like I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me in the OPP then. It took, some sponsorship and some allyship and some mentorship to really help me see that I I c- I could be a police officer and that I could be a really good one if I wanted to be.
And early in your career, did you have any women that were like sort of mentors to you, or that really kind of like there must have been some camaraderie that way of knowing what it's like stepping into this world at that time, and
Mm.
and did you feel that kind of support?
I'm going to be very honest with you, and the answer is no. Um, and I think it's because there wasn't a lot of us. In my journey of exploring what the organization like, it was really men that were sharing and supporting me. When I joined the organization, and my coach officer, Constable Marcy Martin, Charlotte Lake Detachment, reflecting on that relationship, I realized how important that was for me. She was an amazing police officer, and I really, really benefited having a strong coach officer who supported my transition into the organization. Yeah, she was fantastic. Made a difference.
We talked about like perceived barriers and real barriers, and I just want to get your perspective and your experience. What does that look like with being a mom and childcare and shift work and everything that the policing career comes along with that ties into that? As far as like, do you think that that's something that intimidates people and kind of pushes them maybe away from this career?
Yeah, that's another really good question. So yes, I do have children, and I didn't have my children until after I joined. It was an interesting time for me as I reflect on my experience. So when I had our first child, I remember very distinctly at that time a detachment commander who had me in his office and requested that I articulate why I was no longer going to contribute to my shift and why I needed to have alternate duties in the detachment, right? At the time, I was really shocked that I was having to have that conversation. I know now how incredibly inappropriate that was. It it has changed for us. I think it's much better. I think that and when we talk about organizational growth and having lived experiences for all of us as a team, recognizing that women are coming into this organization, they are incredible contributors. And yes, they have families, and we need to embrace that, like that. And we have embraced it. Uh, we are much better. However, I think that it can still be a challenge for families, for young people that are seeking positions like this that have tremendous demands with shift work over time. Our responsiveness as a public service, it is our duty when a major event occurs that we need to be available. It can be and is really hard on young families right now. I think, again, this is my own personal opinion. I believe that as an organization, we need to be better at exploring options for that are more supportive of young families today at times in their lives where they need their employer to be maybe a little bit more flexible in options that would attract and retain people for this job. I think that's going to be part of our growth journey as an organization. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think it's an important conversation for us to have. Does that make sense?
I think part of that conversation is societal expectations, right? My wife and I have conversations about this too, and it's like, it's almost assumed that mom's going to take on more of the roles. I've even been, I've had those conversations at the beginning of my career where it's like, well, obviously you'll need to be here, and then your wife would be taking care of the kids. That's a bit of a struggle too. Like, and that's something that we as men can do better at, is like, that's not one person's job, that's both our jobs. And if mom needs to, like my wife, she was a member of the OPP for quite a while and it's now gone into a different position, but she's got her master's and she's got big big dreams in her career, and we just sort of have to ebb and flow depending on what's going on in whose career at the time, right? So I find a lot of those expectations for that child rearing and that family upbringing, it's assumed that that's going to be taken on by the woman in the relationship.
Why is that the societal expectation?
Yeah, we need to do better.
Yeah, we do.
Well,
a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's I will say, it's really important. I need to give a real shout out to my husband. We entered into this partnership together, and we are truly equals, and equals in every sense. His support of me in my career and the journey and the path that I've taken. Really, for us personally, we are equals in the truest sense. We have a farm together. I'm as supportive of him and his career and what he does, and how we view raising our two wonderful boys who are now both young men. Everything was shared. Everything was shared.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Nice to hear.
I'm going to use those comments as a little bit of a segue to just kind of circle back on your younger years, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
And you talked a little bit about your dad and how he had maybe planted that seed in you to pursue this career. And now, for those listening who don't understand our rank structure, Deputy Commissioner is a pretty big deal. It's the second highest rank you can achieve within the organization. So again, strong female leadership in the OPP. How do you get from a younger person having a conversation with your father to Deputy Commissioner of the second largest police service in the country?
When I reflect on why I joined this organization, like I go back to that comment that I made where, my dad thought that and believed that I could really be a person that made a difference in a community, right? And really, as I say all the time, for me, any decision that I've made in my career path has been one that has always connected me to my why. So my why is opportunities to, make a difference and influence change. There's the change word, growth. I know that might sound a little bit hokey, but it's truly at the center and the core of my existence. My why was deeply challenged in 2004 when my brother, was a serving OPP officer, was killed in the line of duty, and it rocked our world. So, and it really, if there's anything I think that could challenge anyone, to rethink and examine their lives. That reality of being a police officer hit us like a ton of bricks. And it really caused me to have a lot of deep reflection on my purpose. And with the support of my family, my loved ones, my friends, I was able to maintain my connection to my why, which is, again, deeply rooted in community and being able to help others in the organization that are also connected to that why, and supporting our community who deserves the very best police service. They deserve that. So pushing through a very, very sad time in my life, I was able to, it just caused me to hook onto that why even that much more. So as I developed my own resiliency and evaluated, what I was doing, and opportunities presented, doors opened that allowed me to go exploring a little bit in the OPP. I have surprisingly landed in this chair.
Just landed.
But it's not
no big deal.
right. Like, it's not something, though, when I joined the OPP, did I say I'm going to be a deputy commissioner with 29 years on in the organization. That's not something that I was even on my radar. So, all of my choices and decisions have been deeply rooted to, all right, is that going to be a job where I can make a difference?
Right. It sounds like you went through like a period of like post-traumatic growth. If you know that kind of an idea of like when something like that happens in our lives, where it really makes your priorities and your values become very clear, and all the pretense sort of falls away.
Yeah.
I find.
And what really matters to you stands out
Mm-hmm.
in those times, right?
Yeah, I think leading with your heart is a pretty important way to lead. And I have a deep-rooted sense of responsibility to all of our members who are out there working 24/7, who are also deeply connected to making sure our communities are looked after. Right? So again, connecting yourself to your why is super important.
I have to say, I remember a time way back, I want to say during the G8 summit, and I don't know what role you would have been in during that, but I was like a brand new like civilian employee, and I was invited into one of these meetings for the G8 summit. I remember you walked in and you led the meeting, commanded that room, and you were just so decisive. And I was just like, wow, like just looking at that leadership, and I remember that it always stuck with me. So as I watched your name climb the ladder, I was always thinking, yep, that's that same person I saw back in G8. I don't know what role you were in at that point. I feel like you might have been a sergeant or a staff back then.
Yeah, I was a staff sergeant then. Yeah, that was also an incredible experience for the OPP.
Like at press conferences for like big child exploitation investigations and human trafficking, and even like the investigation into art fraud for my favorite painter, Norvell Morrissello. There's I've seen some pretty big things that you've been a part of that are very, very different and diverse too. So it was pretty neat when I was doing some research, Googling you.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I think, truthfully, I did not, when I joined the OPP, I wasn't thinking about all those different opportunities that would exist for me in the years ahead. Now, I think, some of those opportunities you create for yourself through hard work, right? Hard work, determination, commitment, professionalism. that would be my advice to anyone that's listening, is you do have a responsibility. And when you attack your responsibility with those types of characteristics, opportunities are going to present themselves. That's a hard thing to share when we're out there recruiting people to come into the organization. I think it's important, though, for people that are looking to join the OPP to really explore and allow yourself to see the different careers within this organization. And that is one of the things that makes us super fantastic as an organization. And we have a lot of pride, and that pride that we experience right now is because we're filled with men and women who work so hard and are so determined to be the best and to provide a service that our communities deserve. And I will share, when it was 2 summers ago, I had an opportunity to go to the FBI and be part of the National Academy for 10 weeks for leadership development. And what a tremendous experience for me to be seated with, the finest police agencies across the US. Me being the only Canadian representative, there were other international representatives there from around the world in different police organizations, to hear the acknowledgement of the OPP internationally was profound. And we have that reputation and we have that level of respect because of our membership and the hard work and the determination that exists across and throughout the organization. So, when we get out there and tell our story, and we want our story to be one that's going to attract the best into our organization. And I thank all of our recruiters, because you're the ones out there telling our story and attracting those people to our organization.
And now you're helping us do the same by telling your story today on the podcast.
Thank you.
You make me want to join the OPP all over again.
Yeah, I'm doing it.
I'm signing up. It's nice to have, like, I love having you on the show. I think it's like, your story it's incredible, and I'd love for you to kind of break down your, like, the different roles you've had within the organization. But I think what a great role model for women, to aspire to become like, like, I think and to see that it can be done, and to see that, like, this young woman having a conversation with her dad now leads to this, right? And this opportunity now that you've had to promote growth within the organization, and not only within the organization, but within policing as a profession, right? Sitting at a table with all these other police agencies. I guess one of my questions is, like, sitting in that room looking around, how many other women were there representing other police services at that level, right, in leadership? And so if you would mind touching on that, that'd be great. But also, like, what else what were the steps in your career, and kind of what were your interests within? We talk about it being like a bunch of careers within a career. Yeah. What are some of the careers that you've had?
Some of the favorites, maybe.
Yeah, thank you. So my first posting was Charlotte Lake Detachment in East Region. And you got it. And I eventually worked my way across Highway 7 West, working in Central Hastings Detachment, into Peterborough Detachment, Northumberland Detachment, as a uniformed officer. It was probably around the 5-year mark where I could really see my interest start to take me into criminal investigations. And I was super interested, the role of a detective, tackling crime, solving crime. I found that role inspirational. And I ended up getting into the crime unit, and that's really kind of where my pursuit and my chase of being part of homicide teams, right? Solving the most horrific and the most serious crime in the Criminal Code of Canada is homicide. And I was deeply connected to my why. I saw a female. She was the second female inspector of Criminal Investigations Branch in the history of the OPP, walk through our detachment door one day as a case manager. And I looked at her. I didn't know her, but I was like, you can do this, I can do this too, right? So presence, presence matters.
Yep.
When you can see yourself in somebody, you don't even really need to know them, but it's enough. It's enough that enough of a signal that is something that you too can achieve, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I continued my pursuit through. I worked detective sergeant, supervising crime units, became a detective staff sergeant in Criminal Investigations Branch, and then achieved the role of a detective inspector in CIB. It was there in that role, probably I had some of the most rewarding work of my career. Just being able to hold people accountable for the most atrocious crimes and support victims of crime really motivated me.
That would be a tough job, though, detective inspector in CIB.
Well, and it was there the OPP sent me to Nova Scotia, and I was flying back and forth, working a couple of really large, important files in Nova Scotia as a case manager. Would I have ever dreamt that I would ever be given that opportunity? Not in a million years, but I did. And it really influenced my trajectory within the organization. So, I was there for a number of years, and then I had a mentor in the organization come to me and say, Kari, we need you. We really need you to, explore this option. We really think that your perspective, your thoughts on this would be valuable. And that was to work with His Honor, Justice Gouge. You may be familiar with his name, and work with him, with a group of other lawyers and a couple police officers to examine financial crime and the victimization of financial crime fraud on our communities across Ontario. And that was completely outside my wheelhouse, completely outside my wheelhouse. I went there and worked with Justice Gouge, and which ultimately ended up leading to the creation of the Serious Fraud Office of Ontario, which I was part of building. I had, as I reflect on that moment, I had a lot of growth happen because I was taken outside of my wheelhouse. And I became a better police officer as a result of that opportunity.
Now, your approach to investigating homicides, did that lend itself to financial crime and things like that? Were those some of the similar approaches to those investigations?
Yeah, I would say yes. So the principles of major case management, at its core was essential for that. Paying attention to detail, super important. I didn't necessarily understand the crime itself, the mechanisms when you start talking about cryptocurrency right? So there was a lot of learning happening for me, but the principles, Nick, were the same. So, you're absolutely right. And then building a new office, it was essentially creating a brand new little police service on its own. That was when my corporate growth really started to happen. Actually building an entity was something that I'd never done before. And that was really, really interesting.
My wife always tells me that those are the positions to look for when you're building something new.
Yes.
Those are the opportunities to chase down, because that's going to, you can make the most
Yeah.
growth and the most impact on your career as well. If you do it
Yeah.
right.
And they're the most uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You got it.
So-
You got
And that's something, actually, it's funny that you talk about like not in your wheelhouse and getting outside of
Mhm.
like what your comfort is. And I mean, these are conversations that I have on a regular basis with people who are interested in applying, right? But then they're like, oh, the fitness is like, I can't get that level 7 on the shuttle run. And it's like, you know what? Level 5 to 7 sucks,
Mm.
but it's because we're not comfortable
Mm.
being uncomfortable. You have to embrace that discomfort and work through that discomfort to really come out the other side and grow.
Yeah, we grow the
right?
most when we're in those times of discomfort for sure.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It's that's a very true statement. And as parents, having those conversations with our children, and actually supporting and creating opportunities for them to experience that is important. And that doesn't stop when you enter into a career. Like that should not stop.
Yeah, you haven't arrived. You have to keep growing.
You got it. And I think it's a super important message, where growth should be the expectation. Growth
Yeah,
growth should be the expectation.
Yeah.
yeah, and you it's like, I feel like you have this responsibility to yourself
Mhm.
to grow and to develop and to learn and to try different things. And like the OPP is a great place to try different things, right? Like, I mean, it just takes a couple conversations with supervisors and managers to express your interest in different things, and they will help you along the way. And they
Yes.
will help you with that personal growth to become whatever you want to be.
Yes.
Like you talked about, a mentor that you had within the organization who saw something in you,
Yes.
right, that you had displayed because you had these different opportunities, that you'd worked hard for. And now that there's that recognition of like, hey, there's somebody that we could use in this role and that would probably excel, even though it's not what they're used to, right? So I think that yeah, we have a responsibility to ourselves to really work toward personal growth.
Mhm. Yeah. And there's a lot of things that are super attractive about this organization and the work that we do. I'm not going to lie. I can be a little bit of an adrenaline junkie too. And there's moments where we, as police officers, find ourselves in situations where that adrenaline's rolling through us. And that can be a pretty exciting feeling. That's another important part of our job, I think. I can
I
see
would also like to propose growth should be the expectation as the title of the podcast for this episode. I'm just putting it out there.
Ah,
Growth should be
I
the
like it.
expectation.
I like it.
So you've given us a few nuggets of like things that you would tell prospective applicants. Is there any other advice that you would give, like any women out there who have maybe thought like, this might be something I'm interested in, but I'm not sure if I'm either ready or if I would fit? Is there any advice that you might give someone like that?
I think it's important for them to connect with somebody to help reassure them or, help answer their questions. I know for myself, I tend to be one of those people, like I said, I got nudged into this career. I needed to research. I needed to speak to a few people and I need to connect with it. That was important to me. So I encourage everyone to find a way to connect with someone within this organization and ask those questions. There are all kinds of opportunities in the OPP for you, and not to be intimidated by it. A role of as a public service and a police officer is probably one of the greatest honors. And if you have a desire, then you need to chase it. And I go back to that comment. Our community deserves to have good people. And if you're one of them, then you find your way to the OPP, and we would be so pleased to have you.
I think that's a great way to leave it for today. I know you're incredibly busy, and I appreciate the time that you've given us today and the perspective. I know I've learned a ton from you, and I not speaking for Nick, but I see him nodding the whole time, so I know he's
I've been nodding a lot.
pulling it in
This
too.
has been great. It's been great to have this, somewhat candid conversation with someone at the top of our organization who's working to, create growth within our organization. And I think your dad was right. The community does deserve someone like you, and we're lucky to have you. So I'm excited to see what your new command is going to do and the types of things that it's going to bring.
Well, thank you both for creating this opportunity. I'm very grateful, and I really do hope that both men and women really look at the OPP as a career choice. Yeah, we need them.
Well, a big thanks for everyone out there who's listening. Thanks again to Deputy Commissioner Dart for joining us today and her insights. To find out more about career opportunities with the Ontario Provincial Police, please visit our website at opp.ca/careers. And don't forget to follow us on social media. Be kind. It's a choice that costs you nothing.